Hey, I see the live button, so we must be live. Happy Friday, everybody. Today is Friday, July 17th, and you are hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can join our Twitter chat over at hashtag MyCMGRHangout, where I know a bunch of you are hanging out right now. Head over to our website at mycmgr.com. Click on participate, and that's where really it's your ideas, your stories, and it's you that keep this going each week. So with that, this week's topic is all about stories. Sherry said that I should tell a story, but I couldn't think of a really good one. So we'll just kind of skip into introductions, and then we'll talk about storytelling. So yeah, with that, sorry about that. Brock, if you could just say hi, and let everybody know who they are, or who you are, and what you do.
I can. I had to remember to unmute myself. Hi guys, I'm Brock. You'll see me everywhere on the internet as Brock DC. I call myself an amplifier. I've been telling stories for as long as I can remember, and for the past few years I've been using that tool to help small businesses share their stories with their customers and their potential customers and everybody else. So I've been really excited about this hangout, so I'm super excited to talk about storytelling with you guys today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. Hey, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Sorry,
There you go.
I almost forgot to unmute
No problem.
myself. Hi, I'm Brian. I'm a content marketing consultant. I run my own content consultancy, Ana Noemi Media. Throughout my entire career, I use storytelling to advance the next step. And now I'm lucky enough to get to work with small startups and big brands on helping them better use storytelling to get their message across to the audience they're trying to reach. I'm a regular writer for Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and other publications because I'm really passionate and nerdy about content marketing and social, and I just love kind of talking about this. So I'm excited to chat today.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Isabel.
Hey guys, I am Isabel Rohr at Rohr Median. I work for BTC with these two guys, Brew and Dom. I am an account lead, I am a community manager, I am a content producer. I kind of do the whole gamut there. And then my background in storytelling is in filmmaking, so I have kind of a different perspective that I bring to telling brand stories. So I'm excited to be here too.
Hey guys, I'm Jessica. You can follow me on Twitter at Jessica Malnick. I am also a community manager. And my background in storytelling is I used to be a journalist before I was community manager, so I'm all into telling stories, preferably in writing and even some in video as well. Looking forward to chatting with you guys today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Jessica. Hey, Sherry. How's it going, Sherry?
Hey, how's it going? I'm actually paying attention, not on another window. Are you impressed? Hey guys, I'm Sherry Rohde, and I am the community manager at Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, as well as co-produce CMGR Hangout here with Dom and Brew.
Marvelous. I feel like I really wish that Sherry was sitting right here on the couch so that all three of us could be here together and we could have a CMAD reunion almost a full 6 months after it happened.
I don't think we'd fit without Aaron's video equipment. You guys look pretty squished in there.
We are. Well, that's only because I really love Brew. But anyway, hey everybody. I'm Dom. I am a community manager for Be the Change Revolutions with this fella and Isabel. And I also co-produce here with Sherry and Brew, and just so everybody knows, like I've sent out a couple of tweets, I've sent messages to everybody. I'm really, really, really excited for this panel because I absolutely love storytelling, and I think that the people that are here on this panel are really, really freaking good at it. So I'm super stoked to what this is going to be.
Awesome.
Who are you?
Who am I? Hey, everybody. I am Brew, Director of Awesome at BTC Revolutions, and co-producer here with these lovely folks. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about storytelling today. And I'm just going to drop us right into our first question, which is tell us about an awesome childhood story. So who's got one? Who's got a good childhood story? Story about your childhood when you were a kid.
I have one. I can dive into it. All right. I can tell you guys about the time I was almost kidnapped. That's a fun story. I grew up in Turkey, for people who don't know, and during one of the holiday seasons, I was with my mom till I think I was about 4. Super rushed, super crowded. Left her for a split second to look at some cool postcards. Next thing I know, I couldn't see my mom, and this guy came up to me, and he was like, hey, I can take you to your dad. I know where he works, and my dad's work was about a couple of blocks from there, so I knew the neighborhood. Started out, like, went with this guy, and the next thing I remember is my mom rushing towards us and, like, just grabbing me, and then the guy just kind of disappeared. So because of the way we were walking and because we were close to my dad's, 4-year-old, I was like, oh, cool, this guy knows my dad. Thankfully, my mom noticed quick enough that I was not taken away. And I am here to be able to tell you guys that story.
Awesome.
Anybody else have any childhood stories? Stories about your childhood?
That are not as traumatizing?
I see a lot of smiles on the bottoms. Like everybody's thinking of stories. Somebody just needs to jump in and tell one.
I made the newspaper for a girl got hit by a flying barn door when I was 6. I could share that story. Essentially, I was at my grandparents' playing with kittens in the barn, and a storm started up, and I was terrified of storms. So I told my little brother to wait in the barn while I ran to get help, because this made sense in my traumatized 6-year-old brain, and ran out the door to try to go into the house. And basically, as I went out the side of the barn, the door off the front of the barn flew off its hinges and actually landed on top of me and stuck its hinge in my side. Don't worry, I'm obviously okay now. But it's always just fun to be like, I don't know if you've ever played like the two truths and a lie game where you have to figure out which one was a lie. I always use that one because it sounds so ridiculous, but it actually happened.
And Brian, you got a story from your childhood you can share?
Yeah, so I guess I'm slow. When I read what was your favorite childhood story, I wasn't thinking of like something that happened to me. I was thinking of like what was my favorite movie or book or like story that I read as a child that like really resonated. That's how I kind of prepared this question or was thinking about it. So I'm going to still go with that because it still kind of pertains to what we're talking about today. I really, as a kid, really liked the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I was literally obsessed. And this kind of goes with my childhood story. My parents hated me for it, I'm sure, because I really made them watch the movie 500 times. It was like made in the 1970s. It was like a semi-popular Disney movie. It had cartoon elements in it, action, singing, the whole 9 yards, and I was obsessed with it. Not as obsessed with it anymore. I tried watching it again as an adult on YouTube, and it's really, really solely for kids, but I knew their audience. So that was kind of like a story that really, a movie that really stuck out for me when I was a kid, and that's something that there's a lot of elements in there that we can kind of work out later as we're discussing like what makes a good story.
I like that, Brian, and it's funny that that's how you interpret it, because that's actually how I wrote it. But I was like, oh, that works the way Brew asked it. We'll go with that. Either way. So if you have a favorite story that you liked as a child rather than a story of your childhood, you can share that too.
All right, I'll go. So a favorite story of mine is actually, so we had these books that were like, I don't even know, they were red books, and they had lots of stories in them, right? And it was just like every so often, Mom would pull one of those books out and read to us. And I remember a poem about that started out, Grandpa dropped his glasses once in a pot of dye, and it was like purple dye, right? And you put it on, and then you saw purple sky, purple cows were eating purple grass, and like basically everything became purple. And I don't know why, but I just always want to ask for that story, and it was one of my favorite stories. And I think later in life, I often refer to that story as, from a community manager standpoint, or even in storytelling, is like, it's sort of like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? It's like what happens when you put on the purple glasses. Anyways, so
Yeah, that's awesome. I immediately thought of like the opposite side of this. It's funny that I love that you went that way because I actually got some messages from people that were like, so is this question, is that supposed to be your favorite story, or is that your childhood, or like a book? Actually, is my favorite story from my childhood is directly based from way
Okay, it looks like we're having a few internet issues on Dom and Bruce's side, so hopefully they can clear that up a bit. Jess, did you have one to share?
Yeah, I'm good, but I think there's definitely some internet issues. Dom, do you guys want to mute your mic?
Okay. Do you have one, Jess?
Nah, I think I'm good. But I'm super ready to talk about some of the other questions that we have in store.
Cool. Well, let's jump into question 2. So what are the top key elements of a good story?
I'll start. I'll start on this one. I think the top element of any good story is having a really well-defined plot. So even if it is something like, if it's a story that you're crafting yourself, or a story that you're crafting with like members of your community, having a very defined beginning, a middle, and an end, and then also having like defined characters and roles. That's always a key to having a really good story. Anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll go next real quick. I think a good story, the key element of a good story is the ability to incite emotion in the person that you're telling the story to, so that I think that no matter what your story is, it needs to elicit some kind of emotion, whether it's agreement, disagreement. I mean, some of the best stories are some of the ones that are the most controversial because people are super passionate about disagreeing with it almost, but I think that aside from all of the elements that Jessica just mentioned, who are actually super important as well, at the end of the day, you want to be able to have your audience connect to that, and that is based on the emotions.
I definitely will second that. I think, obviously plot, characters, emotion, these are all elements of any good story. I think that timing is also really important if you're actually telling a story. These dramatic pauses kind of between moments in the story, or kind of the build up to the sort of conclusion of your story, the finale. You can pepper in, kind of pauses and strategic timing to make, that momentum build throughout the story and get people really kind of hooked on what you're saying.
I have to agree with all the ladies. Something else that's important in addition to having, a really thought out plot and kind of emotional elements to it, and potentially stirring controversy, is understand who your audience is. I sound like very much like a marketer, but understanding who the story is for is really important for having it kind of resonate with them. Whether it's a Disney movie, whether it's a YouTube video catered to incite action with a community. I think it's really important to understand who you're telling the story to in order to best cater it to kind of what they're looking for, and that pretty much is across the board, across mediums.
Well, anyone else have anything to add to that? Isabel, did you go already? Sorry, I may have missed that.
It's all right.
All right, so
yeah,
question
I'm okay.
3.
Go ahead.
All right, question 3. How can you use storytelling to build trust with your community?
I'll jump in. I seem to be jumping in really. I love this. Sorry, guys. If anybody wants to jump in before me, go for it. I found that I've been telling stories for as long as I can remember. I've been reading stories for as long as I can remember, and the way that you connect with your community and build trust is by bringing the personal element of it. So everything that we just mentioned, emotion, knowing your audience, falls flat if you're not also bringing kind of your personal passion to it, because that's how we talk a lot about how it's better to know the person behind the brand instead of like the big brand logo. So if you're building your company, it's better to show people who's behind it and the story behind your company and how you built it, how the idea came about, what you're passionate about with your small business and your community is super important. And I think storytelling is the #1 way to do that, or at least that's how I felt and what I tell my clients and what I tell my communities when I tell them about storytelling.
I think go on.
Go ahead.
I think adding on to Barack's point, one of the things that's super, super critical when you want to tell a really good story is making sure that I'm going to sound like a marketer a little bit, probably because I am, but making sure that you're super personable and like super authentic. Like the more authentic and the more real you are in telling your story, the more likely it's going to like invest people emotionally and have that emotional appeal that is like so critical to get people to like move to be able to feel something with that story you're telling.
Building off that, consistency is really important for building trust. So you can have that human element once and really connect with someone, but if you don't follow up with that with consistent storytelling, then you could really quickly lose it, since attention these days is really hard to keep, no matter, again, if it's a Disney movie or a marketing message, more formal marketing message. It's really hard today to keep someone's attention. So for storytelling to be effective, you have to consistently utilize it, consistently reach your audience with whatever format of content or format of storytelling you're serving to them. Repetition really helps kind of build that trust in the long term. It's kind of like building a long-term friendship or relationship of any kind. You're not going to necessarily be friends with someone for the rest of your life after meeting them one time, but interacting with them a few times, will lead to potentially a long-term kind of connection. And the same can be said for storytellers, brands, entertainers, etc. Consistency is really important in building trust through storytelling.
Me fine? Am I still super choppy? I know we just jumped back on here, but I just really think that what Brian said is spot on. Like when you think about getting to know somebody, and if you're building trust with a person, you can ask all of these questions, and you can do like what are your parents like? Where are you from? What's your career? Like those are just sort of surface level type stuff. But when you really get to know somebody, like I think about it one-on-one, it's when you tell stories. You hear about like the very little things that they talk about. The first time that they learned to play baseball with their dad, or the time that they went to Disney, or the time that they first learned to ride their bike. That's when you really get to know somebody, is through those stories. And that's the same thing that I look at when it comes to a community. It's like telling those stories of what this person means and what that person means and what you've done or they've done. It just adds such a personal level that it automatically creates this sort of connection with your community or with a person, and that just builds trust. People feel like it's okay to then share stories afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And kind of transitioning into question 4, which I know Brock kind of started on this a little bit, talking about how an element of a good story is to bring out the emotion. But how do you really use storytelling to bring out that emotion? And with that, like, what is the benefit of unlocking passion within people by bringing out the emotion through storytelling?
Since you mentioned that I started, I'll finish my thought and jump in again. Honestly, you kind of said it. It's like you bring that passion out, and the benefit is that you help your community bring their passion to your community. So they're not just part of some community that they're passerbys in and they check in once in a while and kind of don't pay attention unless they have something that they need. When you unlock that passion, they become passionate about your mission in whatever the community is, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's just a community of community managers who love what we do. When you evoke that passion in your community members, in your audience, they'll want to be a part of your story. And they will, not only will they want to be a part of your story, they'll want to contribute to it, and they'll want to help you grow it, and they'll also become advocates for your story. So it's, and we've said this before, but for me, a self-sustaining community is the best kind of community where your members are talking to each other. So if you bring that passion and you evoke that passion with your stories, they will continue to do that on a daily basis without you kind of nudging them along and be like, hey, you know, just checking in, see how you guys are doing. So I think that's the benefit of evoking that passion in your community members.
I think it's interesting also that these two questions were back to back because they go so perfectly with each other. I love everything you just said, Barack. The idea of building trust with people and then also evoking passion, it's kind of like you almost can't have one without the other, because if you take someone on an emotional journey, you're asking them to trust you. If you, for example, if I'm going to use a film reference because I haven't yet, if you watch a movie or a show or whatever, and you feel, have you ever like felt so down throughout the entire movie and there's never any highs and lows? It's like all one kind of emotion, and you feel kind of, you know, exhausted, or you know, there was no relief. And it's kind of like, in my opinion, if a filmmaker doesn't give you any moments throughout a movie or a show to catch your breath, it's kind of a little deceptive in a way, because you need that for a good story, and you're asking, you know, your audience to hold your hand and take you on this journey. So I feel like building trust and invoking passion, you have to have these like arcs and highs and lows in your storytelling, and yeah, you definitely have to get people on your side in kind of an honest way.
And I think that's sort of jumping off of that, like, you know, when you're storytelling and you think about film in that, like, the greatest thing that you can do as a storyteller is to get somebody to sort of buy into your story and to see themselves in your story. And life is not just like you know, just a line straight across. Like, life has ups and downs, just like stories should have ups and downs. And, you know, if you're trying to tell a story in your community, you're trying to get buy-in, you're trying to see the point of it is so people can sort of put themselves in that place and go, man, I can see myself there. And, you know, with those arcs and the ups and the downs, if you're honest with all of that, you know, that's where the community, I think, can really gain trust in you, is because they understand, you understand that things go up and down, and you know, you get them, you know, sort of at a point.
One of the benefits, building off of what everyone was talking about, one of the benefits of like having this passionate community that talks to each other consistently is that you kind of create this community that moderates itself, defends your company, your community, without you as the host or the moderator or the owner having to be there. Some of the most like successful communities out there have really active members that are super. That's the most authentic experience. That's so like storytelling really, you know, proves its worth. I did an interview with interviewed the founder of DeviantArt. DeviantArt is don't know where they rank now, probably 1,000 websites on the net, and they're a social media network focused on the art community. They've been around for a very long time, and when speaking with the founder, he was saying that in the early days they had to kind of be really heavily active, and they still are, but very heavily active in the community to kind of set standards and rules in which how everyone should be acting, and they have to wait sometimes for different issues to come up so they could kind of illustrate how to respond to them as the kind of community moderator. But then as the years progressed, when there'd be a product update or there'd be an issue with the product, the community would defend them and stand up for them and make announcements for them. And today it's like millions and millions of members actively kind of communicating with each other and have fueling this really exciting community. And I think that all came through a genuine interest in the art community and through DeviantArt itself, kind of really storytelling that this is a platform for artists and creatives to kind of share their artwork with the rest of the community. So one great example of kind of the benefits of storytelling in a community and really having that strong passion for a specific subject.
Awesome, thanks guys. That rolls us right into question 5, which is how can you invite your community to collaborate in your brand story? So kind of trailing right off of what you said, bringing them in definitely helps build that sense of community, but what are some tips you've used to kind of do that?
I mean, this might almost be a little bit too obvious, but something that I think a lot of times gets overlooked is make the story about them. Like, make a story about your community members. So kind of showcase their story, like basically create that story where you're telling not only like the story of the brand or the story of the community as a whole, but you're also telling a story of all the members. And one really good way to do that, and kind of tying back to everything that's been said before, is invoking emotions. Like, bringing in those emotional appeals, like sharing those, sharing your individual members, like individual wins and highs and lows, preferably more of the highs, and is a really great way to kind of get more people collaborating and helping you write that story and write those next chapters.
Just jumping off of that, great point, Jessica. What we're doing this month, I also help run the Google Small Business community, and one of the things we're doing this month is actually we're focusing on work-life harmony as a theme. And at the beginning of the month, we created a checklist, like a bucket list of work-life harmony tips. Items is go out to a meal and don't take your phone, or read a book that's not related to business, and we're encouraging our members to kind of share their stories about that and share pictures and doing things like that. And an obvious one is ask questions. I love the idea of polls and open-ended questions with my community, just to kind of get them to, no matter what community it is, across all social media networks and even in email, you can get them to share their stories and collaborate in your brand story by asking them simple questions. And your members want to tell their story. They want to share that story with you, so give them a venue to do that, and it'll just flow easily.
Wait, are you saying that all we have to do is ask people to tell their stories? Is it really, like, is it that simple that we could just ask a question?
I know it's an urban legend, but it's the urban stories that have worked in the past.
That's the thing. I thought I saw that. I thought I saw that somewhere, that there was a rumor that you could do that. I didn't know if that was actually the truth or not.
Yeah, it's like, it's like the myth that it only rains in Seattle. You just have to actually try it to see. So you have to visit to see if it does or not.
That's good. I like that. I like that.
I have a quick question. So you're saying, and I completely agree with you, Brooke, that you should merely kind of ask in so many words your community to participate in an interesting way that relates to them, that incentivizes them to communicate and participate. But I think there's almost too much of that in some cases. So for instance, I read this article. I'll find it after the show. I don't remember who wrote it or where it was published, but it was talking about how there's sometimes too much of this, because in many cases marketers ruin everything, as Gary Vaynerchuk always says, where they're like, tell your Dr. Pepper story, tell your lemonade story, or tell your Clorox story, and they're trying to kind of, you know, invoke those kind of that participation from their community that we're talking about, right? So, and like in some cases, like I don't have a Dr. Pepper story. I just like Dr. Pepper. There isn't like a lot of emotions associated with it, right? So I'd love to hear anyone's opinion and try to kind of hijack and switch this a little bit. But where's the line? Like, how do you draw a line in the sand to create like something to genuinely engage your audience and ask them to participate without just kind of, you know, doing it for the sake of doing it, which I think a lot of brands are you know, implementing now. And I think there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, but how do you like kind of draw a line and make that distinction?
That's a go on. Okay. That's a really great point, and I think it's something that does, you know, there's a really fine line between encouraging your fans or members to share their stories and in a way that's authentic and real, as opposed to one that might be a little more, for lack of a better word, cheesy. One of the things I can think of is like obviously like there's a difference between like how that types of thing comes across. It should be like really ties back to like what the brand or what the community is about. So your story should really tie back to that instead of just being, oh, tell us about, you know, your favorite, like, so something like tell us about your favorite, you know, reason that you use Clorox or whatever might not be as insightful as, you know, when it comes back to something else, something unrelated to that, but it should really tie back to what the audience and what your members are doing as opposed to just any old question.
Well,
go on, Dom.
I mean,
or Barack.
No, Barack go.
Okay, I was just gonna answer the question real quick. Honestly, obviously, it's like I know I kind of said it a little flippantly, and like Dom and I kind of joked about it, but all good community builders and storytellers know that it's about being authentic, and it's about. I mean, I wouldn't in my small business community ask a question about philanthropy if we're not talking about philanthropy. In my philanthropy community, I wouldn't ask a question about small business unless it ties. And one of the ways that you can ask a question that feels natural is tie it into your content. I mean, we have questions where it's like actually just a question, but at the same time, when we ask a question about mentorship, it ties in with the content of here are the benefits of having a mentor in business and finding a mentor, like tips to find a mentor. And at the end, it's, do you have a mentor for your business? How did you find it? Share your stories with us. So it all boils down to good storytelling and being, I hate that word because it's becoming a buzzword, but authentic. I mean, it has to feel natural. It can't be forced. If you are typing a question and you're like, my community members are not going to like this, but I need the answers. If you feel in your gut that it's a bad question, don't post it. Like, because your members are going to notice that it's actually not, like, you're also not feeling it either. So that's.
I think that one of the things too.
Go ahead, Dom. I'll jump in after you.
Yeah. Hopefully I do it before my Hot Pockets are ready. Oh, listen. There they are. There they are again. For the record, it's actually crock pot. So what I will say is, hey, can you take the lid off the crock pot? Cool. Anyway, what I will say is, these are fantastic points. Anytime we are doing anything when it comes to storytelling, I think the most important thing is leading by example. That if we want to ask anybody for any other questions, it's the same as you do with anything. Like if we're asking them a question to tell their Dr. Pepper story, show them an example of a Dr. Pepper story. Because everybody's going to look at it, and if you give somebody an open-ended question, it's really hard for them to just know exactly what they're going to say. So sort of lead them in the right direction. You know, you do this all the time. If you want somebody to send in a picture, if you then send out a tweet showing a picture that they should take, and they will mimic it. So find the best that you can, tap into the influencers, the ones that are already sort of telling stories, and then move forward from there in showing them what to do. So, you know, that I think in a roundabout way, like if you ask an open-ended question like that to a huge community, it's going to be hard. But if you choose some people and then lean into it and ask them, show by example, then I think you probably are going to have a lot better luck.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I was recently working with a health community, which Dom is familiar with, and really kind of our tagline was that you're not alone. And so through that, what we would do is we would invite several community members to share their story, and it was kind of a little bit of a free-form outline, which sounds a little bit contradictory, but there are questions to poke at different parts of their story to find out who's been there for them, what accomplishment they're proud of within the struggle, what kind of tips have helped them work through it. And then when we asked them for more information to actually share their story, we gave them an actual example of a story on the site so they could see how it's laid out and where pictures are going, and an example of how to write up a bio about themselves. And that seemed to help quite a bit. But I wanted to touch on Brian's point, too, about how marketers kind of take it too far, because I've noticed even the whole interviewing thing is also being taken too far lately. I've seen so many places jump on interviewing different people throughout the community to where you can kind of tell that it's no longer about the story, it's about how can I get someone's attention on my site. And I think that interviews aren't always necessarily the only way or the best way to invite community members into your story. Looking at, I can't remember who it was, I think Molson Canadian brand, actually, beer, they had, or maybe it's them, maybe it wasn't them, someone had vending machines set up throughout Europe, I think it was. And because it was a Canadian brand, in order to operate it, you actually had to find a Canadian and have them swipe their passport on it, which I thought was really interesting because it helped spread the history of the brand as well as helps you meet others in the community through it. And there was another one where they worked into their brand story actually with an airport. I can't remember it now. Anyway, I'll look it up and try to find it and share it out on the hashtag. It was a really bad storytelling example there. But let's go ahead and jump into question 6, which is how do you encourage your... Yep.
Sorry, I just wanted to say one thing because I thought about it as you're jumping into that. We've had a couple of people say, "Hey, I'll figure it out afterwards. Hey, I'll send you this link afterwards." I think this is just a good reminder. Everybody that's on this panel, if you're listening to it, make sure you follow everybody and follow along with the hashtag like during the week, because there's a lot of stuff that pops out about past hangouts and all that. So make sure you jump on it so that you don't only get a couple of chapters of the story, you get the entire thing. So there we go. Go ahead, Sherry.
Cool. So how do you guys encourage your community to share their stories? We kind of already touched on this, I guess. But beyond just making that ask, obviously it's not always as simple as asking. How do you really encourage them to get involved when maybe it's not as simple as just asking?
I can take some of that. And I was actually speaking of the hashtag. This is kind of a segue between the last question and this one. Speaking of the hashtag, I think in some instances, for some brands in particular, getting them to share their story might not always be the best move. For example, if you run a funeral home, or something like that, where it's like something where it's so deeply emotional that if you come across, it's very easy for that to come across in a non-authentic or a way that's going to basically be viewed as very, very negatively for your brand. So it's all, at the same time, it's kind of like not all brands should be focused entirely on like just asking a question, knowing what your brand's about, and then knowing, in some cases if it's a sensitive subject matter, going in there and asking them to share their story or, help share like links to a news story is probably not the best approach. And I realized I was half on the topic and half not.
I think a lot of businesses and communities seem to be like incentivizing their community members to participate. So whether it's kind of a formal contest, giveaway, obviously you can't and shouldn't do this too much. I think it should be a mix of your overall approach to getting your community involved, but definitely incentivizing and in some capacity is definitely a fantastic way to get people to participate. And it can be everything from they're being featured at the top of your in your cover photo on your Facebook page. So like I don't know, I haven't followed them in a little bit, but I know for a really long time Dunkin' Donuts, and I know for a fact they still have a thriving community, but for a really long time on Facebook they would pick like I guess their favorite fan of the week, and they would feature them on their Facebook cover photo. I don't know if they still do this, but they did for a really long time, and people were genuinely excited about being featured, and that was incentive enough for them to send in their photos, send in their input, participate in the community overall. Then you can kind of go as far as giving away a actual prize that's not just being featured in the community, but maybe it's like a trip to Las Vegas if that ties to your business or your brand or your community, or it can be you get a free dress if you're a clothing company or what have you. So incentivizing in a variety of ways definitely works if used as a part of a greater mix of a kind of encouragement.
Yep. That's one of the things we're doing now is because for the content that we're creating monthly themes and telling our members what that theme is. So we're like I said, July we're talking about work-life harmony. We talked about mobile, we talked about retail. So we kind of tell them, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about all month. If you have good stories, if you have questions, we're going to be focusing on it, so share them with us. And that actually has helped a lot because it's small business, helping small businesses is such a broad, there's so much, right? So much content we can create and so many questions that we get to kind of funnel that and to let them know, kind of peel back the curtain of, hey, so we've decided that we're going to talk about this month and this is what we're focusing on, really helps kind of trigger that mentality in the members, at least for us. So if you tell them, or if for different brands and for different communities, it can be just as simple as, hey, if you're a restaurant, we're working on a new recipe this month that we're going to unveil in 2 months, or we're working on the behind the scenes. Also, it's a good way of storytelling. It ties in with everything we've talked about today, and it also encourages members to kind of be like, oh, that reminds me of a time of this, or have you tried this? You can even ask a question that ties back to you of, hey, we're struggling with this. Have you guys dealt with something like this before? How have you done it? Or do you have any suggestions? As it might be kind of counterintuitive, but showing your community you're struggling with something, especially if you're a startup or a new business, and asking for their feedback on how to fix a problem could even motivate them to contribute to your story. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but people want to help.
Yeah, that's good. One other thing too, just really quick, is to encourage people, let them know that there's more than one way to tell a story. We keep on talking, and obviously all of us spend most of our days on Twitter, and we sit there. But there's a lot of ways to tell a story. One of the brands that I work with, they feature user-generated content on their Instagram, and that's telling that story. No text, just a picture. That's telling the story of them being there. And Instagram is an entire platform based on mostly just a picture. So that, and then now we're seeing a huge thing when it comes to Meerkat and Periscope. And if you're a brand or if you're running a community, let people know there are many ways to be able to tell a story. It doesn't just have to be text. It doesn't have to be in 140 characters. It doesn't have to be a blog post. So encourage them to tell the story in the way that they feel they are comfortable telling it. And that's when you're going to end up not only getting a lot of content, but getting the best content from all of your community members.
Yeah, that's really what I was trying to get at with those examples that I shared, is that there's more to having someone share their story than just interviewing them too. So be creative and think about what works well with telling your brand story. Because you really, storytelling is about creativity, right? So think outside the box a little. So I have a question here. Well, actually, first let's tell your biggest tip for storytelling, because that's question 7. And then I'm going to jump into question 8, kind of combined with a question that just came in from Twitter. But what would you say is your biggest tip for someone getting started with storytelling, or maybe someone that isn't new to it, but they just need some tricks up their sleeve?
I've got one that is actually from film school, surprise, surprise. And it's the perfect example. I got to shout out my old film professor, Sandy, for this one, because it's been, God, 7 years or so, and it sticks with me every time I go to tell a story. If you're trying to figure out what to include in your story, maybe you've written something or you have an idea for a story and you're trying to kind of piece together the elements. There's actually two things that my teacher told me. One is it doesn't matter unless it matters, which, to kind of explain what that means, when you write a film script, you have to do a process called writing a treatment, so maybe you may know that, but it is very much just like the bones of the story. Like, you can't use any adjectives, it's not descriptive, it's just like, this person did this. You can't say what color scarf they were wearing. Like, it's very, very cut and dry, just like the actions and, nouns and verbs. And it literally it forces you to leave out all the extra stuff, the stuff that isn't necessary or is not going to, add much to the story. And then you can go in and add that back in later, but it helps you kind of with sort of an outline almost. And then the other thing is, the other tip is show, don't tell, which I know some people kind of live by, a lot of visual people in particular. Show examples, like Dom was saying, show examples of the stories you want people to tell, or elicit a visual response, like, don't use too many words when you can use, a visual in its place. Kind of again, to use a film example, if you rely too much on narration to tell a story, what do you have a image for? What do you have a film for? What are people watching? So yeah, the big one though is it only matters. It doesn't matter unless it matters. So if it doesn't matter, leave it out.
Cool. I'll jump in. I like those tips. I really like that. Mine is put yourself in your customer's shoes. So if you were following your community, if you're step back, if you're a member of your community, would you want to read the story you're telling? If, like, before you click post, send, whatever it is, if you don't want to read it, if you would hide it in your feed or unsubscribe from an email, just rethink and maybe reevaluate what it is you're posting and what story you're telling. And even tweaking a couple of words helps, but always, always put yourself in your member's shoes.
Those are some really great points, and I really love the point of show, don't tell. Something I would add to that as well is making sure that you're, in the lungs of being creative, making sure that you kind of have a brain, like giving yourself enough time to brainstorm. Like, give yourself a note, whether it's a physical notebook, an Evernote doc, a Google Doc, whatever you use, to kind of jot down those story ideas, and kind of use that in a way where you have that, so you always have new stories that you can pull from, and as well.
Building off of the idea of like brainstorming and really thinking about what will work and what won't work with your community, I really think like experimentation is really important, and just kind of trying new things. And this kind of aligns with the creativity point. Trying new things, putting your ideas out there. I mean, you want to really base any moment of storytelling off of your intuition and any data if you have that applicable, or any feedback, but just trying different methods of communicating with your audience and telling them stories. You have to test. You have to see what works and what doesn't, and you won't know until you try. So invest in a couple different bets and see what pans out and really drives results with your community.
And I'll throw one in here too. Like when I think of storytelling, my biggest tip is kind of just know your shit. When you're telling a story, you hear like let's say the first time you tell a story is not the best time you're going to tell a story. When you think about it and you know it more and you really look at it and you think about it, and you figure out what's going on, you're going to learn how to tell that story a lot better. So, if you're trying to tell the story of a community member, like obviously like a short snippet or a tweet about something is awesome, right off the bat. But at the same time, figure it out, because what makes a story, in my mind, is like the little details that go into it. And the more you pay attention to those and you know those well, especially if anybody fires back and asks any questions in your community about your story, you can add those little bits. I think just knowing it and really diving into it is really big, because nothing's worse than telling a story that you don't really know, because if you don't have passion behind it, you certainly aren't going to have people in your community that are going to have passion behind it.
Also, it's the quickest way to ruin a story when you don't really know it. You're partway through it and you're like, never mind. So let's roll into question 8. I don't know if we'll have time to get past this because we have so many awesome storytellers on panel here. Question 8 is, what's the best community story you have seen recently? And I also want to throw in a question from Terry on Twitter, which is, have you ever had a story go wrong? So either give an example of a story that you really love or an example of a story that's just really gone wrong.
So of a recent story, kind of storytelling moment that's gone wrong, that I noticed, I've not participated in, but I'm going to be writing about it soon. Airbnb just released a video ad commercial, I guess, trying to be kind of provocative and high level, talking about, it's called "Is Mankind?" So they're kind of playing off of the question, is mankind, and they're also it's just mankind as one word, and it's literally a quick video of a baby walking towards a door with like a man's voice in the background narrating, and they're trying to, or at least from my standpoint as a marketer, they're trying to say, are people kind? Are people kind enough to let you stay in their own homes? Is what drives people to be kind and let share their homes with you as an Airbnb host? And the whole internet kind of backlashed at them because it was confusing. Some of the headlines I saw said the ad was disturbing and creepy, and I think the issue there was that they had a good idea with something that potentially would resonate with their audience, but they didn't provide enough context. It was a little too high level and not specific enough. So yeah, I would definitely check out that video. Just Google Airbnb mankind ad and see what I mean. It's a little confusing, and I don't think they're a strong enough brand yet, since they're fairly new. I guess they're, I know they're probably super funded and have millions and millions of dollars, whatever, but they're not. They don't have the brand credibility that a Coca-Cola or some other community that's been around for a really long time as part of a brand. So I think it kind of fell flat there. So that's the kind of potential storytelling moment towards a community that went really, really awry.
This might not be community. It sort of is a community story, but the storytelling idea of that, I think of Nationwide from the Super Bowl this past year. They tried to tell a story of a kid that didn't get to do a bunch of stuff because he died. And I don't know if you guys remember that. Twitter blew up after that commercial. It's they were obviously trying to tell a story. And storytelling sometimes can seem very marketing, and I know this is very marketing on the side, but they tried to tell a story of, what would happen if this was to happen, and they told it pretty poorly. And because they told it pretty poorly, the world blew up, and everybody knew Nationwide, but they knew them as kind of the Debbie Downer of the internet at that point. And so especially when you're telling stories that are sad. It's a point that needs to be raised in that, but they went about it the very, very wrong way in trying to do that. So obviously I would be able to make a ton of money if I knew how to talk about super sad things and make people pay attention to the story. That's a hard thing to do, but there's definitely a lot of ways you can tell those stories wrong.
Yeah. to move on to the other side of that, which is on the very, very positive side of something that went really well, and it's kind of in the same realm of insurance company, ironically enough, is when I look at like what Allstate did with their Mayhem guy in the Mayhem sale during the Sugar Bowl, and pretty much was a really clever way to kind of integrate like this key character that they had. And if you actually look at it, you can just research it from like Allstate Mayhem sale, and like how it integrated that with like Twitter and their blog and all the commercials that pretty much ran during the Sugar Bowl this past year. And it was just a really well done campaign, and it didn't make you think, wasn't something like where nationwide and all you thought of was dead babies and creepy, horrible things. And as for a story that, didn't, and it just had a good context, it had a good plot line, it was well done across all of the different levels, and it was a good example of how to tell a story on one platform on the commercials and then carry it online through all of their social media channels in a really unified way that we haven't really seen, that a lot of brands haven't mastered that well yet.
I have something that, bear with me, it might seem a little bit meta, but it feels appropriate to bring together all these awesome examples. So I also feel, since we're all community managers, or we were at one point, or are somehow involved as the CMGR hangout, I feel like there's a lot of times where there's kind of a distinct story that's being told, obviously, by a brand or by an individual on social, but at the same time, like every time you get on your brand's Twitter account, for example, and talk to people, the manner in which you're speaking to people and kind of the experience you're giving is telling a story. You're telling the brand story through the way you're interacting. It doesn't even have to be what you're saying. It's how you're saying it. And I promise I'm not affiliated with Pizza Hut in any way, but they do a really good job on their Twitter account by really being very conversational and being funny, and just you feel like you're talking to a person and a brand at the same time. And I feel like that's sort of the golden ticket with community management. You see brands really stiff and kind of robotic, and they answer the same thing to everybody, and you just don't feel that personal touch. And yeah, so that kind of the humanizing, conversational manner in which you talk to people is actually telling your brand story and what's important to your brand.
Just chiming in one more time, another brand that does a really good job on Twitter, and you wouldn't think of it because of what they sell, is Charmin, the toilet paper company. Like, they're like some of the most random, just funny, humorous tweets, and like it's actually through all of their accounts as well. But it's like they find a way to make toilet paper, which is super mundane. Everyone buys it, but like you don't really think, how can you have a story around this? And they just find a really clever way of doing it through humor.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everyone. This has been a really great chat. I know Brian wanted me to throw out there that he does have a newsletter on storytelling that you can subscribe to. Brian, I don't know if you want to jump in real quick and tell them where they can find that.
Yeah, I send out an email every week about how to do marketing the right way, since there's a lot of hype out there. And it's some articles for me that I've written, members of my team, and then also great stories that we found across the web that relate to how to do marketing the right way. So definitely just go to my site, brianhoneyman.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. Thanks for having me.
Cool, thanks. Next week we are talking about how to help community members adapt to new technology. So we do have a couple of panelists lined up for that, but we also still have room. If you'd like to join on air, definitely just let me know. And thanks for joining us today, everyone. Bye.